be tough tonight. Only 3 acts can go through.
I cannot wait to see your next performance.
If you don't get the votes, then something's really off with the show.
It would be a crime if they don't vote you through.
Thursday and Friday, America's Got Talent at 8:30 on Pearl.
The latest scenic images from around the world. Prince Jewelry and Watch presents Earth Live. Every night at these times on Pearl. Prince Jewelry and Watch presents Earth Live. After the news roundup.
Good evening. Rising tensions in Crimea as Russian troops seize Ukrainian ships and military installations are weighing on markets in Europe today, despite an earlier advance in Asia. Asian markets got a boost on expectations of economic stimulus in China. A report showed that China's manufacturing fell to an 8-month low in March, in another sign of slowing growth in the world's number 2 economy. Stocks are mostly higher in early trading on Wall Street, extending gains from the week before. Here's a look at the charts. The Dow Jones is down 53 points, the S&P 500 is down 12 points. US 30-year Treasury bond is priced at $100.70. Spot gold $1,310 an ounce. US dollar cross rates. The yen 102.23, the euro 1.37, and the sterling 1.64. European markets, the UK FTSE is down 32 points, the French CAC is down 50 points, and the German DAX is down 121 points. Stay with us, the news is next.
You're watching TVB Pearl. Up shortly, we hand you over to our news department for a summary of all the day's top stories in the News Roundup.
We're the next stage of human evolution. We are the future.
Funkel 18. Mask Expert presents X-Men First Class. 7. Yeah. 7. Looking good. 7. Go get 'em! 7. We did it! This weekend, the Sevens on Pearl. The chicks will soon be forced into adulthood, and they still need to do many things for the first time. Fit in with the group, walk on ice, defend themselves, dress snappily, and swim. Tuesday, Penguins, Spy in the Huddle, the last episode, at 9:30 on Pearl Spectacular.
March 29th, 8:30.
Turn your lights off for Earth Hour.
One planet, one future. Sign up now on our website.
You guys tracked me down so that I could find my dad and safeguard our future.
Maybe it's better to just leave it alone.
Steven, he's dead.
Well, come on, he ought to know how his father died.
I saw him. My dad is between life and death.
Save all of them.
You have to try to kill me. I'm here to say goodbye. This is about all of us. Limbo is real. So either you believe that I'm the chosen one, or you don't.
The Tomorrow People, Tuesday night at 10:40 on Pearl. Get to know its policy, flexibility, and how it affects you. Get to know standard working hours. Tonight after the news roundup on Pearl. 2014 FIFA World Cup Brazil, just 80 days to go.
It was 20 years ago. Ever since, time has never been so magical.
The time now is 11:44. The Time Check was brought to you by Chopin.
Malaysia admits no hope of finding anyone alive on flight MH370. Day of turmoil in Taiwan as protesters evicted, and mass death sentence for Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Good evening. The Malaysian Prime Minister announced tonight that new data shows the missing Malaysia Airlines jetliner went down the Indian Ocean more than 2 weeks ago. It effectively ends all hope of finding survivors from the doomed flight.
Based on their new analysis, Inmarsat and the AAIB have concluded that MH370 flew along the southern corridor and that its last position was in the middle of the Indian Ocean, west of Perth. This is a remote location, far from any possible landing sites. It is therefore with deep sadness and regret that I must inform you that according to this new data, flight MH370 ended in the southern Indian Ocean.
Relatives of those on board were devastated at tonight's news. In Beijing, there was chaos after the announcement, with many overcome with grief. Now the focus will be on finding the wreckage, and as Sonia Artero reports, rescuers are getting pretty close.
The Chinese IL-76 aircraft spotted 2 large floating objects and several smaller white ones in waters some 2,500 kilometers southwest of Perth. Even though the U.S. military flew in a black box detector, nothing was found.
Unfortunately, we didn't find anything. It is quite disappointing that we didn't. We want to be out there helping, and we want to find what everyone's looking for.
Australia's Deputy Prime Minister was eager to check out yesterday's sighting by the French. He said it consists of radar echoes in the same part of the ocean where Australia and China previously picked up satellite images.
Now, the French sighting is, I guess, a piece of new material because that's in a completely different location. That's about 850 kilometres north of our current search area. So we need to check that out as well.
On the investigation front, background checks of all 239 on board have found no militant or criminal links. Because the aircraft was deliberately diverted, authorities are officially investigating on a criminal basis. They're leaning towards ruling out pilot suicide because the plane flew on for hours instead of taking a sudden nosedive. Sonia Artero, TVB News.
It's been a day of high drama in Taiwan, where authorities moved ousted protesters from the Executive Yuan building. Police were still removing people at daybreak today. Scores were injured and dozens were arrested. But demonstrators are still occupying the legislative building after they forced their way inside last week to protest against a trade agreement with the mainland. The opposition Democratic Progressive Party criticized President Ma Ying-jeou for his handling of the situation. Jenny Lam begins our coverage on the turmoil in Taiwan.
Riot police moved towards the Executive Yuan in Taipei overnight. They first targeted the crowd gathered outside the back entrance to the building. Protesters who resorted to lying down were pulled away one by one. And in the melee, some had to be taken to hospital. It took authorities about half an hour to clear the demonstrators there. And they moved to the front. After a lot of pushing and shoving in a sea of riot shields and batons, water cannons moved in at around 4:30 a.m. The demonstrators did what they could to stay put. One water cannon truck ended up with a burst tire. The former chairman of the opposition Democratic Progressive Party, Frank Sher, was there to show support for the protesters. He too ended up soaked to the skin. One by one, those who forced their way into the Executive Yuan were led away by police. The protest that started in the Legislative Yuan last Tuesday expanded to the Executive Yuan last night when students barged into the compound at around 8 p.m. They used blankets to protect themselves as they climbed over barbed wire barricades set up by the police. And soon the Executive Yuan building became a free-for-all. Over the balconies and through the windows, they gained access to the cabinet offices. Police efforts to keep them at bay were in vain. The protesters simply outnumbered the police. They want the government to yield to their demand and withdraw the cross-strait service trade agreement. They fear the deal, which would open up the Taiwan market to mainland companies, would push small and medium-sized companies on the island out of business and lead to job losses. More important, they accuse the government of lacking transparency in coming to the agreement. Trying to justify the clampdown on the demonstrators overnight, Premier Zhang Yihua said this morning that the government should not sit by idly while people took over the power center of the administration. He explained that confidential documents on Taiwan's domestic, foreign, as well as economic and social affairs are stored inside the Executive Yuan building. So the government had to intervene to protect the security of Taiwan. He refuted comparisons with the government crackdown on student protesters at Beijing's Tiananmen Square in 1989. Police finally regained control of the Executive Yuan later in the morning. Jenny Lam, TVB News.
Joining us now with the latest on the situation is Diane To, who's been covering the student protests in Taipei. Diane, tell us, what is it like now?
Yes, the action has not slowed out here at all. Now, there have been different speakers giving speeches all night long. They range from just students to teachers to just generally disgruntled people. And the topic's been swinging between the discontent towards the trade pact with the mainland to demanding President Ma Ying-jeou step down. President Ma himself held an emergency meeting earlier with the Premier and the Vice President. He called on protesters to remain calm and be rational. Meanwhile, all eyes are on the leader of the Legislative Yuan, Wang Jinping, who has been holding talks with the opposition parties all day long. Earlier today, Wang met with representatives of all parties, including members of the ruling Kuomintang, to discuss a way out of the current crisis. There was no conclusion this afternoon, and the meeting will continue tomorrow. In the morning, he also held a meeting with opposition lawmakers who agreed to reject the cross-strait service trade bill and restart the talks on the deal with the mainland. It was a unanimous decision made without any of the Kuomintang members present. So, of course, it has been rejected by the ruling party, which insists that it will not recognize the vote made today. Outside the Legislative Yuan, the students have come back in force. They seem more determined than ever after what they see as an abuse of police power when authorities cleared people from the Executive Yuan.
Make me very sad, and I can't accept that the government used the violence to the student.
When the government not reply our purpose, we have every right to make the protest even severe.
But reports that a rift has been growing between the student leaders is making things more complicated. They're said to be split between those who insist on keeping their rally a peaceful one and those who feel the need to step up the action. Diane To, TVB News in Taiwan.
Here in Hong Kong, there were demonstrations for and against the crackdown on the student movement in Taipei. That story from Stephanie Choi.
The Hong Kong Federation of Students said this bouquet